Greetings, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Real Movie News Podcast, a place for all of us real movie fans to just hang out, talk about movies, talk about what we've maybe seen. We'll get into some news and stuff a little bit later. But hey, listen, before I get into today's review, just a couple of house cleaning stuff, I guess we'll call it. Starting later this weekend, I'm going to be putting up a different kind of episode. It's going to be a little bit more of a overall news rundown of everything that's happened in that week. And something that I would like to maybe start incorporating is I'm going to make that a weekly thing. It's going to show up on the weekends. I haven't been able to nail down if it's going to be either Saturday or Sunday when the post goes up. This is kind of a new channel, so I guess we will wait and see what happens there. But a segment that I would like to do on there is a little bit more of a kind of a news mailbag, if you will. It doesn't even have to be news related. So I started doing this a little bit once on my blog. It didn't really take off, so I want to try and do this a little bit more in audio form. So what I'm going to have or ask any of you guys to do is you can either tweet me at Kylan Real Critic, or you can go to my blog, realmovienews.net, and shoot me an email or tweet at me a couple of questions regarding movies. Honestly, anything. You can ask me personal questions about movies that I may not like or that I've liked in the past. If there's a particular news article that came out that I was reporting on, or if you follow me on my blog that I wrote about that week that you either will have a comment on, feel free to tweet at me that information. And I want to start addressing that stuff on the episodes. I realize that for this first weekend, I'm probably not going to get a whole lot. So if we end up, I'm just going to continue to put this announcement out there. Once I get enough to where we have a few questions, then I can start doing it. If we start it this weekend, great. If we don't start it this weekend, that's fine. I'll gather up the questions that I have, and we'll make it a big, long thing. And I want to start making it more of a weekly thing. So anyway, like I said, any questions or topics, if you just want to leave a comment, whatever, you can tweet at me at Kylan Real Critic, Kylan, Real, like the movie Real Critic, or you can go to my blog and shoot me an email there. Like I said, the blog is realmovienews.net. Make sure it's a .net, not .com. Some fools got the .com already. But anyway, that's just a real quick announcement that I wanted to put out there. But hey, without any further ado, we're going to talk about a movie that I've recently seen. A movie that has been getting a little bit of Oscar buzz lately, but I want to give you guys my thoughts on it. This is going to be my review for First Man.
You're down here and you look up and you don't think about it too much, but space exploration changes your perception. And it allows us to see things that we should have seen a long time ago.
We have serious problems.
We've got this under control.
You're a bunch of boys. You don't have anything under control.
First Man is a movie directed by Damien Chazelle. He's a director who recently directed movies such as Whiplash and La La Land, both of which received Academy nominations. None of them won, but La La Land came really close if you know all about that. But anyway, he directed both movies, and he's now directed this one. First Man is a movie about Neil Armstrong and his 8 years leading up to the moon landing in 1969. Neil Armstrong is being played by Ryan Gosling. And it's not a movie about the space race. That's the first thing you need to be very clear about. This is not only the Apollo 11 mission and how the Apollo 11 mission started from the ground and how it eventually ended up in the moon. No, this is a movie that takes place over 8 years in Neil Armstrong's life, starting from 1961 all the way to 1969 when he inevitably ends up on the moon. Spoiler alert, if you didn't know that. And this is a very human movie. This is not action heavy. This is not really all that science-y. There's definitely some science jargon. So if you're somebody who really likes the moon landing and space, then there's definitely something in there for you. But this is a lot more of the look at how the space program affected Neil and his family and those around him as they were going through the various missions in the space race, leading all the way from his training to the training with other people with him, like with Jason Clarke, who plays one of his friends, Edward White, in the movie. It also takes a look at the influence of Armstrong going through this space race and how it affected his family through his kids and his wife, which was played beautifully by Claire Foy. But in this human element exploration, I have to say the movie drags. It is not overly out there, and I knew that going in. I had read a few preliminary reviews saying that this is definitely not about big gung-ho space. You definitely get those shots of space, and you definitely see them in the space, but they're definitely more on Earth. It's all about the human interactions, and the movie really drags when it does this. Now, I am a huge fan of various different types of movies that are a look at just the human element. In fact, Damien Chazelle's movie Whiplash, all about just the human element. There's some great music and stuff in there also, but it's a look at the effects of what it takes to become really great and be the best in your field, and what that could potentially have on the human psyche. This is also another look at Neil Armstrong's psyche and how he goes about dealing with going out into space. And Ryan Gosling plays this almost a little bit too dour. He's very gloomy. He's a very calculated character. Now, full disclosure, I do not know Neil Armstrong personally. I don't know what his character was like. So, for all I know, Ryan Gosling is playing this role to perfection. But I have to say, no matter what it is, either in just the directing or if he is playing it perfectly, it's a little bit off-putting. When you have an entire movie that's going through and exploring the different human elements between his friends, his family, and the people that he works with, you've got to have some kind of a dynamic shift in the character. The entire movie, Ryan Gosling pouts around, and for good reason. He has a lot of a life tragedy. Who wouldn't be depressed and down in a lot of the stuff he experienced? The movie goes over many of those things that I had no idea Neil Armstrong ever had to deal with. But we're not, as humans, even when we are down and depressed, we're not that way 100% of the time. There's always some kind of up, and the movie never explores that a whole lot. He's just depressed around the whole time, and it's showing how that affects those around him a whole lot. And when you have a movie that's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and out of those 2 hours and 20 minutes, only 20 minutes of the time, or excuse me, I should say, out of those 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours of that is him being just mopey. It really makes the film drag. Now, I'm going to admit it sounds like I'm really bashing on this movie, and while I definitely had some issues with the pacing of the film and Ryan Gosling's performance, I loved Claire Foy as Janet Armstrong, and I loved Jason Clarke as Edward White. Both of those characters really were bringing in a breath of fresh air. Anytime that they were on screen, I was finally able to see something other than Neil Armstrong pouting around his office or at work. The other thing that really makes this movie is the space launches, and once you're actually in space. Huge round of applause. Huge round of applause for the cameraman who shot all of the launch sequences. Now, I'm going to get a little bit into that here in a little bit, but first I want to talk about the IMAX experience. Seeing the moon landing finally at the very end is gorgeous. When they're finally out in space, looking down on Earth, it is gorgeous. And what Damien Chazelle does so perfectly in filming this movie is that anytime these characters or anytime the camera or whatever is on Earth, it looks like it's being shot in a very grainy way, almost as if it was being shot on digital film. I don't know if it was actually almost like it was being shot on film, not digitally. Now, I don't know if they actually used film or if they digitally went in there and made the picture look a little bit more grainy. But it really added to a dynamic contrast when on Earth all you have is this little bit more grainier type footage. And then when you're in space, it's crystal clear. The colors are just popping. And you get these wide, huge scopes of Earth from space as they're looking out the cockpit windows. Or if they're finally landing on the moon and they're looking across the vast horizon and the different craters and the shadows. It is absolutely a gorgeous thing to watch. I highly recommend seeing this in IMAX for that experience. And it goes to the directing prowess here is that we're showing man on Earth as, in a little bit more grainy way. And then when they finally get out into space, really showing that achievement, what that meant for humans, and being able to shoot that in a higher resolution that made it look crisper, makes it all the more beautiful. So, like I was saying, if you can, go see this in IMAX. Now, I'm going to get to a little bit more of a gripe as far as the camera work. Shaky cam. Huge pet peeve of mine. Anytime these characters are talking to each other, there's a lot of the times you could tell that there was a guy holding the camera. And starts to move around and there's some movements and it shakes. And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. It's a nitpick. This is not something that bothers a lot of people out there. So I'm not going to harp on this too much. Where the shaky cam absolutely adds to the film is on these spectacular launch sequences. The sound that's being used and the shakiness of the cam really puts you in the seats of these astronauts as they're being shot out into space, breaking through the atmosphere. They shoot it in a way that makes it very claustrophobic. You really feel like you are strapped down in a five-point harness, going up into space, rattling around with all these instruments and the sounds blaring and Houston talking back to these people and the dials and lights. It is really surreal just how well Damien Chazelle is able to put you in the cockpit with these astronauts. So, points given. Where I normally would gripe on a movie for using shaky cam a little bit for the dialogue areas, but where they incorporated that into the launch sequences, beautiful, absolutely spectacular. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this movie getting some Oscar nominations, and I'll tell you what, I don't know if the movie will get a nomination for Best Picture. I also don't know if Damien Chazelle will actually get a nomination for Best Director, but what I will say is that Claire Foy most definitely is going to get a nomination for Best Supporting Actress. I don't know if Ryan Gosling will get the director for Neil Armstrong. The movie will probably get several nominations for the technical awards as well. I think that this is a very special movie and something that really anybody should go out and see. And if you are going to see it, definitely see it in IMAX. Just know that the movie does drag quite a bit throughout, but if you can get to the space launches and if you can get to the very end where they finally get out of their spacecraft and walk on the moon, it's absolutely worth the price of admission. For a score, I'm going to give First Man a 7 out of 10. Like I said, it's slow, but the payoff on the end is absolutely worth it, and there is some good acting in this movie as well. And the visual effects are outstanding. All right, my friends, that concludes my review of First Man. Have you seen the movie yet? If you have, what'd you think of it? If you haven't seen it, are you going to based off of my review here? Anyway, leave a comment below. I'm really interested in seeing what you guys have to say about this movie. What do you think its Oscar chances are? Who was your favorite performer? Let's make a discussion out of this. Remember that you can always catch me on Twitter at Kylan Real Critic, Kylan Real Critic, or on my blog, realmovienews.net. Remember, it's a .net, not a .com. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. My name's Kylan Riley, host of the Real Movie News Podcast, and until next time, keep it real.